I would sit and cry more nights than I would, be actively doing things.
College Shelby, you said she was so focused on just getting tinier.
And that is just not a place that I could ever imagine myself being again.
Then you took another side-by-side picture of the Shelby today. Not only does it look like a healthier, more, in my opinion, more badass Shelby, you can just tell the way that you feel about yourself is night and day. You are listening to the KML Movement podcast. Connect with me on Instagram at Kelsey Lensman. Hope you enjoyed today's episode and don't forget to share with a friend. What is up, everybody? Welcome to a special episode of the KML Movement podcast. Today, we have our first guest on in a long time, and I cannot wait to share this amazing woman's story with you. Her name is Shelby Gonyo. She has been a client of ours only since November, which has been maybe 6 months by now. But she has been somebody that has such an impactful story and history that has led her to be where she's at today. And seeing the mental transformation, the physical transformation, and I just know that you are going to leave this podcast not only inspired and ready to run through a wall, but having a small little nugget that is going to make your life and push your life 1% better. So, Shelb, welcome to the KML Movement podcast. How are you?
Oh, thank you. I am very well. I'm feeling a little nervous, but A-okay.
That's okay, right? If we're not nervous, that means we're not growing. So you're exactly where you need to be here. I love it. So first thing, Shelb, I was actually talking with Coach Leah 10 minutes before we started. And I was like, you know where Shelby started? In my low back Move Smart program 2 years ago. And it's so crazy to even think about then. But can you, for a little bit, Shelby, for the audience, just describe where you've been, like your journey of young Shelby till now? I know that's a very vague question, but describe just your journey, health, fitness wise, but also where you've been at mentally there.
Yeah. So I'll do a general kind of layover, and then we can dive into whatever parts you want to dive into. So basically, I started lifting just freshman, sophomore year of college, which was way longer than I want to admit now. And I didn't really have any plans going on. Like, I was just kind of doing it for, mental health or like physical appearance or whatever people do during college. And then come out of college, in terms of fitness, I kind of just like stopped going, and then I kind of dabbled here and there, and then I would fall off and I would start again, and I would fall off and start again, and just was this vicious cycle. And then I got in a side-by-side accident where we actually rolled a side-by-side, not wearing seatbelts, not wearing helmets, because we're, teenagers, early 20-year-olds doing fun stuff. And I couldn't move, my arm any higher than like where my shoulder sits. And it was terrifying. And like I said, I had been very active at that point in my life. And it was quite scary to see like how quickly I like lost all of that. And that's when I reached out to you guys, and I had followed your program on Instagram, and I was terrified to reach out in any sort of way. But after doing that low back program for like 2 weeks, I could do anything I was doing like months before the accident, which is crazy. And nutrition was all over the place until I met you guys. So
yeah, that's wild, Shelb. So think about back then, right? You even posted a picture the other day of college Shelby where she took a picture in the mirror, and you said she was so focused on just getting tinier and wanting to get tinier. And then you took another side-by-side picture of the Shelby today. And not only does it look like a healthier, more, in my opinion, more badass Shelby, you can just tell the way that you feel about yourself is night and day. So can you give me a small little glimpse of like that Shelby, how she felt about herself versus the Shelby today?
Yeah, so this is a big part of my journey, and I think it needs to be talked about more often, because I feel like it's such a common part of people's journey that like a lot of people don't hear about. And especially when I was going through it, I I'm the only person on the planet that is going through this, which everybody feels that way. But so in college, I was with friend groups that like you just think you get along with and you think you mesh with, and it's like not necessarily the case once you really look at things at like the big picture. I was falling over this boy and putting my mental health in the toilet for all these people, and staying up late and working out at 6 a.m. with like 3 hours of sleep because I was worried about what these people were doing or who I wasn't hearing from. And it was draining. I mean, I would sit and cry more nights than I would be actively doing things, and that is just not a place that I could ever imagine myself being again, and I hope I never am at that point again. But that was a huge piece for me, and that comes with the body image issues and the skipping meals because my mental health is in the toilet, and I'd rather be sitting in my room alone than like going out to get a meal. Um, and I feel like that's, like I said, I feel like that's something that a lot of, especially college age women, females experience, and I feel like it's just not something that's talked about, and you kind of just feel like, oh, well, my problems are so small, like, why am I doing this to myself? But they're not small, and they really kind of trickle down into every other aspect of your life, and I just think it's really important to kind of talk about that.
Yeah, definitely.
That was
insanely important. No, I appreciate that. Like, and you said back then it's almost like you were silently suffering, right? You were doing outwardly the right things. You were going to the gym, even if it was on 3 hours of sleep. You were eating in your apartment instead of going out to food. But little did everybody else know you were silently suffering in a body that it sounds like you still somewhat hated to an extent. I know that might sound really deep, but I know you've talked about it before. That's why I'm bringing that up. Mm-hmm. So what is that shift that you've made today? Like, what is the biggest mental shift you've seen yourself make?
I think for me, the biggest thing is just, well, taking it day by day. I mean, not every day is going to be perfect and not everything's going to fall into place, but I feel like knowing that I am in control of so many more things than I would have ever imagined I was in control of is huge. And I say it all the time on our team calls, but like putting your happiness in your own hands and you call it power, putting your power in your own hands is like, it's such a game changer. I mean, that can be with your kids, that can be with your parents or your family or your friends or whoever it is. Like, and I know it's hard. I don't have kids, so I can't speak to that. But I know like a lot of people who do put their happiness in so many other people and they don't even realize it. And it's like, that's what I was doing for years. I mean, I did that for like 4 to 5 years following when it first started. And I think, taking that back now, I'm like, holy shit. Like how long would I have done this for if I didn't like reach out to KML or, get that help that I needed? Like, it's just crazy to think about.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So you've noticed yourself, the previous Shell put her happiness in other people's hands, or maybe it's circumstantial, right? Mm-hmm. I'll be happy when X, Y, and Z, or I'll be happy when X, Y, and Z acknowledges me, or, those little details versus you saying, no, I'm taking this in my own hands. I'm taking it in my own control there, right? What allowed you to make that shift? Like, what did you start really, was it pursuing the nutrition and starting to seeing that? Or was it just the mental work that we've worked so heavily on and you've just taken it and ran in our team? Like, what was that accumulation of things for you?
Yeah, so it was definitely obviously a little bit of everything. But I would say one of the biggest parts for me is surrounding myself with people, being that the KML team, like, my sister who I know supports me, my parents who I know support me, and falling on those people a little bit when you really need it, and taking all the information and all the struggles and, meshing them together to get rid of those struggles as much as you can and take on, as much responsibility as I can. And that was a struggle that you always want to push onto other people. Oh, well, I'm not happy because my friends are doing this, or I'm not happy because this boy won't talk to me. Like, no, like, I'm not happy because I'm sitting around waiting for these people to come and make me happy when, like, that's just not going to happen. It's just not realistic.
Don't get us. Oh, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole real quick. And I'm okay with going down this rabbit hole. So, and that's that ownership, right, Shelb? Like we talk about, not every circumstance in your life, if you've been through some really deep trauma, it does not mean that you caused it or to take ownership of that heavy, heavy thing. But, and I'm going to say but here for a reason, where you're at mentally, emotionally today, we need to, I'm going to say need to take ownership just to allow us to take one step in the right direction, right? If I'm always, well, this thing is keeping me down, this thing's here, you're always going to stay stuck. And so that taking ownership for you, Shelby, I'm going to give you a huge compliment here, is you have been somebody on this team. You show up to every team call. You lean into Coach Navi tremendously. You post on social your journey. You're so open about the things that you're working through. I mean, you have a whole binder of education from just our team calls, right? It's popping up right here. And that's something that we can give the best things out, but until you really take ownership and allow that to be in your life, it doesn't matter, right? So I want to say thank you for being who you are and having that shift for you of, all right, I'm going to take this and run, because look where it's led you to be today, And I think that is so insanely powerful.
Yeah, it's and you kind of mentioned like social media a little bit, and it made me think of something else I wanted to mention. That was absolutely terrifying. Like, that's probably, like, I made that Instagram, I deleted it. I made it, I deleted it. Probably 6 times. And then I'm like, you know what? We do so much for other people and worrying about, what other people are going to say or think. What am I going to think? I mean, if I saw somebody else doing that, I'd be like, damn, you go. Like, good for you. Like, why am I so afraid other people aren't going to think that for me, or like, take what I'm doing and make it better for themselves? Like, it's such this weird, like, phenomenon that, like, we all support other people, but we're afraid they're not going to support us. And it's just this weird kind of cycle.
Yeah. I mean, and we just talked about it before we went live. Because you shared your journey, right? Because you were ability to be open and, oh my gosh, I'm downloading this Instagram and making this Instagram. Don't know if anybody's going to like it, but I don't care because it's my journey, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people think that way. But Shell, because you did that, another person saw your own journey, saw your progress, and they seeked out, don't even know if that's a word, but seeked out help for themselves because they were inspired by you. And I tell everybody, your biggest everything is your story, right? Your story is everything. Nobody can take that away from you. And so, Shel, just because you did that, you were able to create a ripple effect in other people's lives. And that's just one person. I imagine there's thousands of other people, hundreds of thousands, that are going to be a ripple effect because of you, Shel. And I mean, isn't that crazy to think about right there?
It is literally, like, wild. Like,
Yeah.
like, I just think, like, even, like, one person, like, liking my post, or, like, seeing something or commenting or whatever, and then, like, to hear things like that, it's just, like, crazy. It still, like,
Yeah.
doesn't feel like I'm the person that's, like, helping people, and I feel like it's just super cool to realize, like, how simple it can be to help other people. Like, why not share your knowledge? Like, I don't know, but
That's good, Shelb. Let's switch tracks a little bit. We're gonna dig more into the mindset piece of it because you and I could talk about that forever. But let's switch tracks for you a little bit more into your nutrition journey because it's been amazing to see. Okay, because you were someone where you were doing the right things, like you were making the right choices, quote unquote. You can't see me if you're not on YouTube, but you're doing the right things, but it's like something wasn't adding up. So, what's been that nutrition journey for you, or what were some of the big realizations that you've had?
yeah. So starting, I mean, I kind of dabbled in it a little bit, but starting when I first started lifting, like, I was skipping meals, like, way more than I'm gonna admit on this call. But so, like, things like that, and I was lifting. I mean, like, 6 a.m. for an hour every day. Like, I mean, decent weight, like that kind of thing. And I was itty bitty, teeny tiny, and then, a few years later, like, down the road, I started gaining some weight back because I was just, eating those healthy things, and I had these macros that I couldn't even tell you where I got them from, and I was following those, and I was like, man, like, there's no progress going on. Like, I am stagnant. I would stop working out because I wasn't seeing progress because my nutrition was not where it needed to be. But I'm like, how can I figure this out on my own? There's so much information going around. And I was like, you know what? I'm doing it. Like, I'm taking the opportunity to reach out and get a coach and do what I think is going to work for me. And it was like literally like night and day. Like, I look at pictures from when I first started this, and granted, I gained some weight over COVID because, you're at home for a long time. You eat a lot of good snacks. But now, like, I eat all those good snacks, and I eat, regular food, quote unquote, like I feel like there's such a balance now, and I've lost 10 pounds in the past like month and a half. And like you always hear like, oh, if you're smaller, it's harder to lose weight, or like if you're this, it's harder to lose weight. Like, who teaches us that? Like, that's not real.
Social media, that doesn't count.
Like, that's so not real. Like, if you want to cut, like, you are very capable of cutting. It's just you have to know what your body needs, wants, and feels, and it's so much more than just your food intake. It's your stress, it's your sleep, it's your environment. Like, it's so much more, and I feel like that was a big piece for me. On top of nutrition is my stress. Like, that was like night and day for me also.
Yeah. What was that for you? So you said stress was night and day. What was that? What did you notice there?
I noticed I was sleeping, like, once I took time to like figure out what those stressors were without just being like, oh, it's work, oh, it's my relationships, like what specifically in those things is stressing me out so much.
Mm-hmm.
And in the big scheme of things, like, it's just like this random thing, like, oh, work is supposed to stress me out, so I'm gonna be stressed about it. But like, I was sleeping better after I started journaling. I started reading books again, which I had convinced myself I hated to read. I love to read. Just different things. Like, I feel like it just trickles down so much, like setting a nightly routine. That eliminated so much stress in the morning of, oh, I got to get ready for work. I woke up late. I did this. I did that. I set a nightly routine. I'm waking up on time. I have my clothes ready to go. Like, everything's set. So why would there be stress?
Yep. And if you're listening to this right now and you're like, Shelb has her shit together. She has a nightly routine. She's training. Like, and I know it might sound like that, but I also want you to remember, whoever is listening to this, whether you're in your car, whether you're at the gym, Shelb started with one thing. Shelb started with one step. And guess what? She took another step and then another step. And that's where it's an accumulation of things over time. And so Shelb now, because she's consistently taken those one steps, she's where she's at today. And Shelb, speaking to that person that, yes, they're very hardworking like you, right? You're a hard worker, you're super driven, you're a go-getter, but things aren't adding up, or they're just really frustrated, or that might have been you, Shelb, maybe a year ago, year and a half ago, whatever that time frame is. What would you tell to that one person?
I would tell them, A, to be confident in like their decisions. B, to make the investment. Like, it's so much more than just like, when I first look at things, I'm like, ooh, my bank account is not gonna like that. But then like, that's not even a thought that crosses my mind now. Like, when things, like, if I'm investing in myself, it's not even something that like comes to mind at this point. Like, sure, it's important, and you shouldn't be making yourself go in like a complete hole to do certain things for yourself. But at the same time, you're going to be better to everybody around you, and you're going to be better financially, or, you're going to have less stress if you just take the time for yourself to realize, like, what's really going on in your brain. Like, what's really the reasonings as to why you're not making progress. And like you said, those little steps, I did not have my shit together when I first started this. I honestly probably had like 2 things in my life like put together, like, and I think that's super important to realize. Like, social media is such a game of like, oh, well, this is beautiful, and like this meal looks perfect, or like this workout is beautiful, and my butt looks so good in these leggings, or like whatever. And that's just like not, everybody starts somewhere, and I feel like it's just like something people have to just like really focus on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in that starting point, like you've trusted the process, and that process does not always look pretty. You've messaged sometimes of like, cause I don't want to go out to my garage gym, even though it's badass, to train, right? I don't want to, in the moment, sometimes you don't want to do said thing, but it's that overcoming. I talk about the weak voice a lot, overcoming that weak voice that tries to steer you off track, or even for Shelb, tries to convince you that I don't even know if I'm worth investing into myself, or, oh, I don't even know if I deserve said thing. So Shelb, can you talk about that little voice for you, or like things that you've noticed there with that?
Yeah. So I think, the first time like I was thinking about that little voice or whatever, I'm like, man, this thing's just not going away. So I think, it's something you don't really think about until you're like, this is not like, these are not necessarily my thoughts. Like, this is something like external in a sense. Like, yes, it's internal, but like, I'm not thinking like, oh, you're never going to hit that lift. Like I wouldn't say that about myself, but like it comes in and it's like, you just have to make peace with it. It's always going to be there kind of thing. And just, like I heard some people like you put a name to it, you name it Deborah, like whoever it is, and be like, no, never.
It's my mom's name, by the way.
Okay, we'll go with Phil.
Sorry, I had to add that in real quick.
But like, and I think it's important to realize like you don't have to listen to that voice. Like, sure, it's there, but like, how many millions of thoughts do you have in a day? And you're like, why am I thinking that? Why is it any different when it's coming to, your progress or your nutrition or your fitness? Like, you ignore all those other thoughts in a day. Like, why pay attention to the ones that are, self demeaning in a sense? Like, I kind of look at it like that, and I feel like that just is a huge game changer. Like, now I sit on the couch and I'm like, man, I don't want to work out. Like, that voice is coming in, and then I just get up and do it. Like, it's not even like a thought process anymore. Like, that voice comes in, but I'm still getting up and doing it as that thought process is happening. So it's super interesting how it all, like, little by little, just like paying attention to that voice and what it's saying and what you're saying back to it, really.
Ooh, that's good. Talk more about that. What do you say back to it?
So,
because I know you're good at that.
Yeah, I think I have not always been good at it. So sure, it still creeps in, and sometimes it takes the best of me, but not very often anymore. But I think when it creeps in, saying like, oh, if you're not going to hit that lift, or your nutrition's already in the toilet for today, so why continue tomorrow? And then you go through and you think of those goals that you should be writing down, and I look at that in my brain every day, and I'm like, I'm not going to make it to this goal if I listen to this little whiny voice that's popping into my head. And I think that's another huge piece for me, is actually like writing down a goal and being like, okay, I'm not going to have 40,000 goals to hit. I'm going to have one. And that is what is going to stop me from listening to that little voice in my head. And that might sound like kind of crazy, or like how do you do that? But I feel like it's so much more than setting a goal like just because. Like, I genuinely want to achieve this goal and like show myself that I can do it, and that little voice is not a part of that.
Huge. Shelb, that's huge. And it sounds like to you of clarity, right? Because especially, I'm going to generalize, us women love to be super women, right? We love to be the best at everything for everybody at every time. And so it can be hard to really even prioritize what's important, right? Because when everything is important, you've heard me say this again and before, nothing is important. And so Shelb, yes, has a career, yes, has a relationship, yes, has her fitness, yes, has her family, but because she's clear on what she's going after, she's able to make better decisions, right, Shelb? Like, you're able to be more clear about what the decisions you want to make.
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's huge. I love it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think it's like super important too to realize like a lot of us focus on how other people are going to be like all my friends, like they're like, oh, let's go to dinner. I'm like, okay, I got to work out first, and they're all just like, oh, okay. But like so many of us fear that like that's gonna be like a deal breaker for so many people, or like our friends or our family. And I feel like, hey, if that is a deal breaker for your friends or family, like, see you later kind of thing. Like, these are my goals and this is what I'm doing. Like, you're either here for the ride or you're getting off, like, kind of thing. So I think it's important to realize like your perception of how things are gonna be is really probably not how it's gonna be. Like, your brain is just playing tricks on you, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard when perception is reality to you, right? When we perceive, this is why sometimes when you're so in the woods of it all, we perceive ourselves to be something and we're like, well, if I just had what they had, right? Or if I just were more motivated. That's the buzzword in the fitness world, and it drives me crazy because it's like, if you wait till when you're motivated, or you wait till when it's the right time, you will never take action ever, right? If I wait, the one thing that changed my life is whenever I feel uncomfortable, that means I'm in the right spot. Whenever I'm very comfortable and I'm just going through the motions, I'm like, oh, that's scary to me, because I know when I'm uncomfortable. And Shelb, this has been big for you, of leaning into that discomfort versus shying away from it. And through that, you uncover layers about yourself that you're like, well, I didn't even know that existed. Has that been always innate to who you are, like leaning into that discomfort? Or is that something that you've had to really train yourself to do?
Ooh, it was not natural. I will say that. It was definitely something that I had to lean into, and I think I was at the point in my life where I was like, what's it gonna hurt? Like, what is it gonna hurt to try to lean into this discomfort? And it's honestly the best thing I've ever done. I mean, even like I was talking to Navi today in my check-in, or she touched upon it in my check-in. I was like, driving to Ohio for 11 hours by myself is terrifying to me. Terrifying, but I'm gonna do it because like once I'm doing it, like how empowering is that to be able to say like, oh, I did this thing that totally terrified me. It's like being on a podcast. Terrifying, but I'm doing it.
But you're doing it. It's huge. And then it's just you, and like granted, don't do something to kill yourself. That's not the game plan. But it's like when you're used to taking a step into that comfort zone, discomfort zone, or that growth area, you're like, okay, cool. And then the next time it comes, you're like, okay, cool. It's just continually taking that step that allows you to then really challenge yourself. And then for you, Shelb, it's like, wow, what am I capable of? Right? If I'm capable of this much, can I imagine what I'm capable of in a year? And for you, I can only imagine what your next year is going to look like. It's going to be insane.
It'll be interesting.
That's wild. So for somebody that is on the fence, Shelb, or somebody that was maybe Shelby 6 months ago, 8 months ago, what would you tell them?
Oh, we talked about this on the call a little bit the other night, and I did cry because it was something that was super powerful. But just, and I kind of said it earlier in the call, and I will say it a million times because it's so real, and I feel like people just really need to take it in, is you have to take control of your happiness. You have to put it in your own hands and stop. How is somebody else supposed to make you happy if you're not making yourself happy? Like, it's just not, it just doesn't mesh. And, we talk about identity and stuff all the time, and if you would have told me this 4 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, okay, cool. You also have to be ready to change. You have to be ready to make that change, because if I would have tried this 4 years ago or read, I read Atomic Habits not too long ago, and like, that was freaking awesome. If I would have read that 2 years ago, I'd have been like, okay, cool. What does this do for me? So I think that's another big piece is, lean into yourself and trust yourself to do these things, but also still taking accountability and like putting all your own feelings into your own hands. And granted, there is external factors. They're going to make a difference. People can make you happy, but they shouldn't be holding on to your happiness. They shouldn't be like the one determiner of if you're happy or not.
That's huge. So for you, you said you took back that happiness. How did you do that?
Speaking very specific to my story, so Adrian, who I'm with now, sorry Adrian, we're bringing up the past a little here. So we had a pretty rocky start with our relationship, and it was very back and forth, or not so much back and forth, I could say. So I stopped. I cut the people out of my life that I felt needed to be cut out because they weren't bringing what I needed into my life. My friend groups, I, kind of turned the tables and started hanging out with people that, wanted to just take adventures, wanted to go do stuff, wanted to be like just more my people, if that makes sense. And not that the friends I had before weren't my people, but, you change when life goes on. You don't have to be friends with the same people forever, and that's kind of the cycle I was in. And I think that was a huge part of my puzzle, was just, cutting out those pieces, quite literally, that were my biggest barriers. And then, slowly, I kind of talked about it with Navi one day, like Adrian and I live together in a house. We've been together for 2 years. Like, once you make yourself happy, like, everything else kind of falls into place. It's not like, like if I would have been with Adrian 3 years ago, like, I wouldn't have been as happy as I am now because we weren't meant to be together at that point in our lives. Like, we were two totally different people. And I think it's just realizing, like, what if it's stressing you out so much to the point where, like, you are not happy at all, like, cut it out.
That's good. Good. So like a lot of it was, and we talk about like, I don't know if we talked about it on a team call yet. We're going to bring it up on a team call, but like edit, audit, and then add to, right? Audit where you're at, audit your friendships, your relationships, your environment, edit what you need to edit, right? And that doesn't mean they're bad people, but it just means for the Shelby today and the Shelby that she wants to become, who does she need to add in, or who does she need to potentially slow communication with because it's a really negative influence on her life, right? And so as we edit and audit there, that is so transformative, Shell, because then you're just bringing it back to your spot. You're bringing it back to that. We've talked about this a lot. Self-confidence is self-trust, right? Has that piece for you, like you trusting yourself of you're not going to let that little voice steer you in a different direction, has that been big for you in your journey?
Yes. I think like, even talking now, I kind of like, I'm thinking about things that like I haven't even thought about, like that have come as like different pieces of my journey and like how far like I've come from that. And it's just kind of crazy to think like even like a year ago or 6 months ago, like that little voice was like so control. I don't want to say controlling me because it sounds a little like elevated, but in a sense, like, and I see it in so many other people, like even my like some friend groups and things like that. I'm like, oh, like I just wish I could give you like what I'm feeling right now because, people are like, oh, I'm feeling good, like I sleep well, I do this and I do that, but I'm like, you say that, but you don't know like how good it feels to like genuinely feel good. And some people are genuinely, and like that's awesome. But like I see some people, and I'm like, I know you're not truly happy, and I know you're like this like facade that's going on. And I think like I just wish I could give what I'm feeling to other people because I don't think people realize like how powerful it is to not listen to that voice or like take. And don't get me wrong, I still get it, and I'm making this sound way easier than it was because it was a lot of tears and a lot of hard frickin' days and like now it's easier, but that's because I went through those days and like I learned from those challenges and that I don't want to do that again.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that person Celeb that you just said, I see them and I'm like, if you only could feel that feeling deep inside, right? You might think you feel good, but you don't even know what feeling good truly feels like. What would you tell them? Like, what action step would you tell them to take, or maybe a few action steps to take?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I would say first and foremost is just like you said, auditing. Make sure like you know what's going on, what's like, what's making you happy, what's stressing you out, what's, you feel like is hindering you, whether that's a job, a person, where you're living, it could be your environment because that is a huge factor. But just taking kind of note and even physically writing it down, that's been a huge thing for me is, I'm a writer. I love to just get it out, do a brain dump or whatever it may be, and just audit first off. And then after that, I think it's just kind of, again, taking accountability. I know I've said that a million times, but, really adjusting yourself to have that thought process of like, okay, this is happening. What can I control and what can't I control? And that's been huge for me, especially in my work life. Like I said, I was so stressed in my work life. And then you take on what you can take on and the other stuff. The one thing my grandfather taught me is don't worry about the shit you can't change. That is the one thing I'm like, okay, why is that such a complicated process? But it's really not. Like you cannot change it. And it can bring you stress, but like if it's bogging down your whole life, like something bigger probably needs to change. So I think it's important to like constantly be auditing and paying attention to what the factors are that are like I said, barriers to where you want to go and where you are right now.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head. We're going to go into pigeonhole real quick. So you hit the nail on the head. You said something right there, and this is the first thing that got brought up in my mind. You said, I can only control what I can control, or I can't control what I can't control, right? And especially for that person, because that was me back in my journey where I was frustrated, upset, did not like my external circumstances, and I felt like life just threw me a bad hand, right? And then you almost feel a victim of everything that's going on around you. And in the social media world, it's like, well, just feel happy. And you're like, I'm not happy. Like that does not do anybody of a service, in my opinion. Right. So for you, you said, just control the controllables. And this is why, in my opinion, and this is an opinion, hence why I own KML Movement, because this is so important to me, is those controllables start with just the pillars in your life, right? It's not, you sometimes can't control that person that's doing something to you. You can't control Shelb for you, like everything that's happening at work, but you can control what you're putting in your mouth a little bit, right? You can control how you're moving your body, what you're putting in your ears. And so I think this is, in my opinion, Shelby, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, is it's almost like your health and fitness is a doorway, right? When I then realize, okay, I can control the 2 to 3 main areas there. Doesn't mean you're going to be perfect, but when I edit and audit to say, okay, I don't like my external circumstances, or hey, I want to change this said thing, what can I start with for me? And for me, a lot of times that is like how I move my body, what I put in my mouth, and what I'm putting in my ears, right? What am I listening to there? And when this is why I think it's so impactful to start your health and fitness journey, not even trying just to get people into what we're doing, but just for them to like get some fire under their butt, is because when you start feeling in control of what you can actually control, it allows you to deal with those external circumstances a little bit better. And when chaos happens, a lot of people, especially the state of the world right now, when you feel chaos internally and externally, chaos is everywhere in your life. Versus when you feel, okay, I have at least me good. I have my pillars pretty good. It allows you to deal with the external chaos in a little bit different of a light. So, Shel, for you, is that something that you found that doorway for you, health and fitness wise, be a big impact in other areas of your life?
Yes. um, like 100% yes. Like I feel like, health and fitness, and then again, like my mentality has changed almost like completely. Like it's like crazy to think about. But like I was just talking to Navi the other day, and I was like, "Oh, Navi, I've been a little stressed about my budgeting, so like I'm coming up with a budget. I'm doing it." And I feel like that's something like year after year, I'm like, "Oh, I'll come up with a budget. I'll come up with a budget. Like I'll get rid of debt. I'll come up with a budget." And like, no, like I'm coming up with a freaking budget, and I'm gonna follow it. Like, so I feel like it's just something like I know I can come up with a budget, and I know I can follow it. And I feel like I said a couple years ago, like I would have made that budget and then thrown it in the trash a week later. So I feel like, doorways of different things, or like even like the way, like you said, things you put in your ears. Think about like, I think about this a lot, like the friend groups I used to be with, my friend groups now, and like what they talk about, who they talk about, how they talk about people. And that's just like, I find myself so deterred by like, which everybody should be, but we're all not, because we're all gossipers and it's just a way of the world. But like, I'm so deterred when like I'm hanging out with people and they're just like talking shit about everybody around them. And I feel like that's something like a lot of people do. And it's something I've never really noticed, but I'm like, that turns me off so much now. And like a few years ago, it's something I wouldn't have even thought about. So I feel like making that good headspace for myself, I'm like, I want to give everybody else a good headspace and a good, foundation. And I don't want to be that person that's like, why people are fearful of doing things. And I feel like so many people are like that. They're like, oh, I want to do that. And then they're like, oh, I can't believe she's doing that, or I can't believe he's doing that. But like, set the foundation for yourself and then set it for everybody else. It's just like, and I think that's like huge for me.
Yeah, huge. And you're setting the standard for you, Shel. I mean, you're setting your own standard. And just like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, because you did that, other people are seeing. And other people are then setting their own standards for themselves and wanting better for themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, it gets me fired up. So, okay, I could keep you all night, which I would love to, but we're going to bring it back full circle for us. So, Shel, what are three things that you could tell one person listening to this podcast that would just completely get them on a better path, or the path that they really deserve and want to get on? What are three things you would tell them?
The first one is, okay, the first one is knowing the difference of beating yourself up and holding yourself accountable, and like being that person that's like holding your happiness, but like knowing the difference of like, oh, like, damn it, I'm not doing this today, and like, oh, you're so, like a piece of garbage, you're like not doing this today. Like they're two totally different things, but sound very similar. And I think that's a big piece, is like holding yourself accountable, but knowing when you're getting like to the beating yourself up stage and kind of flipping that around. The second one I would say is knowing that health and fitness is so much more than just working out or just eating healthy foods, quote unquote. You should be knowing how to lift, like what lifts to be doing, like not just following random Instagram workouts, which is what I did for many years. So I think that's a huge, huge, huge piece, is knowing that it's like, just because you have your workouts and maybe your nutrition figured out, like stress is going to cause you to bloat. Like, work's going to cause you to lose your timeline, and like you might not get stuff in, like, and you have to work around that. But knowing that like it's flexible, but you also have to pay attention to so many more pieces than just working out. So that's another big one. Yeah. And then last one, I have a couple written down, so let me see which one stands out the most. The last one I'm going to say is, don't make yourself feel small to make other people feel bigger.
Oh, give it to me, Shelby.
That was big for me. And especially like in the world of social media, there's so many things going around and so many things to look at and people to compare to and this and that. And you shouldn't have to make yourself feel small to want to reach your goals. It's like saying no to people. It's a magical word that I use so often, and I love it. And it is just like, everybody says like, oh, just say no, like, but like, really, like, it's so like, and it's not just like, oh, I don't want to do that. It can be. If you don't want to do something, you shouldn't be doing it. But like, I don't know why people feel like they need to make themselves little and like, oh, well, I'll just suffer through it because, you know, they asked me to do it. No offense, but the person that you're, you know, going to hang out with, or the group or whatever, like, they're probably not going to care. Like, and they say that in the nicest way possible. It's like, they're your friends. They're going to understand, like, if you have things that are, you need to do for you, whether that's going to take a bath, taking a nap, like working out, whatever that may be, like, you have all the power in your own hands to be like, I'm going to do that, and I'm not going to feel guilty about it. And you shouldn't feel guilty about it because it's what you need to do.
I love it. Okay, I know you wrote stuff down. What else do you have to give me?
Okay.
What are the little things that you wanted to talk about too? Because I know you do.
I've touched on most of them. The fourth one is eat your damn food, because that was also big for me. And I feel like I apologize to everybody, first of all, because I'm a fast talker. So you might want to slow down this podcast when you're listening to it. But
put it 0.5.
But I put that bullet down, and that was one of my top bullets, because when I was, you know, struggling in those few years in college and, you know, just out of college, like, I wasn't eating meals and I wasn't even thinking twice about it. It's not like I was like, oh, I'm going to skip this meal because I want to be skinnier. Like, no, I just wasn't eating meals because I wasn't thinking about eating meals. So if you take one thing from this podcast, is go eat food, protein, at least get protein in, drink some water. Like, that's like a main thing for me, like, that I was not doing when I first started my journey. That was like, hence why I was like 95 pounds when I was like 20. And like, that's not healthy. I don't care how old you are. So I think that was like one of my big ones. And I think in my journey, like, I realize how important that is now and how much that would have helped me before. And like, not following the fad diets of like, no carbs and no this and no that. Like, carbs fuel your brain. They're very important. Eat them. So that all goes with that one point. But I think that was like one of my big like shifts, like, now looking back, that I wish I would have, like, just eat your damn food. I don't care if you track it. I don't care if, like, just eat something.
Yeah. And it helps you get to your goal. Like, eating less does not equal better there.
Yeah.
And for you, how's relationship with food been for you throughout the entire journey?
Like I said, when I first stopped, like, or when I first, like, wasn't really eating, like, again, it wasn't even like a thought in my mind. I was just like, oh, like, I'm just gonna sit in my room and like go to bed or whatever, like, and I'm not gonna eat food. And then going into when I was lifting a little more, and then like, just like late college and stuff, like, I was eating food, and again, I was, you know, I was on that verge of like hyper focusing on food, which also wasn't good. I had two totally different realms, I guess, but like, once I came out of like realizing I wasn't eating enough, I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna set these macros and I have to hit by the number, like, carbs, fat, protein, like I can't stray, I can't do this and I can't do that, and that is also not healthy. Macros should be a tool, not a like end all be all. And I think that was like another stage in my journey, looking back now, that like I didn't even really realize that. Obviously at the time I didn't realize it, but, and now it's like, you know what, I'm a fairly strict cut right now, but I'm like, if I want to go out to dinner, I'm going to go out to dinner. If I want to have a margarita with my meal, I'm going to have a margarita with my meal. I'm not going to beat myself up for the next day. I'm not going to tell myself I need to do an extra cardio workout. Like, the weight's going to go up on the scale and it's going to come right back down. If I keep my simple plan, like my regular schedule, it's going to go up and it's going to go back down. And it's going to go up and it's going to go back down. So I think that's like a big thing, is just realizing that, like, A, the scale's not everything. I've never been one to focus on that. But B, like, you can have fun foods, and you should have fun foods available to you at all times to not binge, because if you just restrict it, you're going to want it so bad and you're going to eat it all. And that's when it gets bad.
You hit the nail on the head, Shelb. Okay, last question for you.
Okay.
All right. What has being a part of this team here and knowing your journey, right? What are some of the biggest realizations, or what has being a part of this team done for you?
Everything. But no, I think realizing that there's so many people, like, across the country, I suppose, because I mean, I'm in New York. I don't know if people know that. I live in New York, which is 11 hours away from Kelsey and the KML crew. But like, it feels like I've known some of these people for like years. And I've known you guys for like, you and the main crew, like a couple years, and then like the rest of the crew, like 6 months. And I feel like these people understand me and like my journey more than some of my closest friends would ever care to understand, kind of thing. And I think it just creates like this environment of peace and comfort, and like, but also adds that little bit of, resistance and challenge enough to where like I feel comfortable to lean into that. Like we talked about leaning into the uncomfortable spots. Like if I didn't have KML, like I wouldn't feel comfortable leaning into uncomfortable spots, because I wouldn't have anybody to do it with me. And like community is key for me, and like having these contacts and in these groups where you can just be like, hey, like, today sucked, or like I hit a PR today, like, and it was freaking awesome, and everybody is down the line supporting you, cheering you on, no matter what the day was like. You could cry on a KML call and people are like, oh my gosh, I did that too. And like, it's just such a group of people where everything is just calm, and it's you feel comfortable. Like my first call with KML, I wasn't nervous at all, like after the first like 5 minutes. And that's not like me, because I am a nervous wreck. Was a nervous wreck.
Look at that language change. I love it. I love it. Well, Shelb, I just want to first say thank you for you being you. I mean, thank you first for even sharing your story. And this is not the last podcast you're going to hear from Shelby, because this is the first of many. Because Shelby, you keep growing, and it's not just about continue to grow. You keep learning more things about yourself. You're just uncovering what has always been there. And that's something that is insanely powerful, Shelb. So first, I just want to say thank you for leaning into your journey and being able to be open and vulnerable and share your journey, because that, in my opinion, like I said, is the most powerful thing, right? We all go through some shit. We all go through some highs, some mediums, some lows. And when we combine together, it allows us to be a force for good when there's a lot of not force for good out there, right? So, Shelby, I just want to say thank you for being accountable to yourself, for leaning into your journey, and also for even allowing us to guide you, because we can give you the best thing, but if you aren't taking ownership of what you want for you or taking the steps, it doesn't matter. And so you, for Shelby, that's when I first messaged you about this. I'm like, you're one of my favorite people to have on this, because I've seen you grow in such a short amount of time. And it's crazy to even think about 2 years ago, I didn't even know you. And now to see the woman that you're here today, but also the woman that you're becoming, I can only imagine what that future looks like for you. And Shelby has a testament of just you taking action for you. And so I just want to say thank you for that. It's been incredible to watch on my side.
I love that. And I love just being a part of the crew. And like I said, if I could tell, if I could tell anybody one thing on this call, it'd be, if you're like debating it or whatever, just do it. Just make the jump, take the investment, and just do it. Because like I said, I am a completely different person than I was 6 months ago. And that sounds like cliche, like, oh, end of the program, you're blah, blah, blah. But it's not the end of the program, because I love KML and I'm going to keep working with KML past my coaching. Yeah. So I want to thank you guys, because you have done wonders for me, as along with my help, obviously, but like, I wouldn't be where I was without you guys. So,
hey, we got a good crew here. I love it. We got us all together. And Coach Navi, just for those that know, Coach Navi is the one that coaches Shelb, and she's done an amazing job with you both, Shelb, and working together on progressing you. And it's literally just the beginning. So everybody, thank you so much for taking time to listen to this. In my opinion, the most valuable thing you have is your time. And so the fact that you took the time to listen to Shelb, to listen to I, talk a lot about mindset, but also about her journey. I first just want to say thank you. And if you take one thing away from this, it's that it is available to every single person out there. Shelb, as much as I love her, as much as I love myself, we're not anomalies. We weren't gifted with something amazingly special that isn't available to you. And that's what I really hope to communicate, and that we've communicated, is that you just need to take one step. You do not need to have your whole entire journey figured out. And guess what? You're not. You're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be like, is this the right move for me? You're going to question. You're going to be nervous. You're going to have all these emotions. But guess what? That means you're exactly where you need to be. And so if anybody has any questions, Shelb, what's your social media so people can reach out to you?
I believe it's Shelby G Fit.
Shelb G Fit?
Yes.
Perfect. And we'll put it in the show notes too. If it's not that, we'll put it in the show notes. But if you have any questions for Shelb, she's somebody that she will talk about her journey and want to help anybody and everybody. I know she has a great heart. So reach out to her, tell her, screenshot this, tag her, tag me at Kelsey Lensman, just to take one thing away and see what hit home with you the most. And once again, guys, appreciate you tuning in and can't wait to see you guys next week. Have an awesome week.